Hello again. This is Matt Wilson, Senior PM for Defend, and I am filling in once again for Sam Kerr, who is the regular product manager for the Application Infrastructure Security Group. So today we're going to be talking about the release items for the upcoming 12.7 iteration, which is about to kick off. So let's go ahead and start by sharing what we've got planned for 12.7. So normally I would focus just on things that are already in the 12.7 column, but I'm actually going to show what's in 12.6 right now because these two items they were stretch goals, which means that the engineering teams had committed to start looking at them, but not to actually delivering them in a particular release. So these two items are going to go at the top of 12.7 and are likely going to consume the majority of the release, and that's what we're going to see in the actual 12.7 release itself. So let's jump into the first item. So this is the minimum viable change for Container Intrusion Detection System, or IDS. So what we're trying to do with this is give our users a way to detect any sort of malicious activity that may be attacking the application or the infrastructure itself. So this would be something that sits after the actual, any sort of network security detection piece and closer to the application of the container itself. What we are proposing with this MVC is to leverage the open source Falco project or software and allow that to be deployed into GitLab managed clusters. So Falco will then start detect events that are happening, and we're going to provide a minimal way to actually display that information to our users. So what are we going to cover with this? So as I mentioned, Falco, that's the technology that we've selected for this MVC. And we're going to give users a way to deploy that, likely through a configuration file, as per kind of our normal way of doing things around here. And then we also will, of course, allow it to be uninstalled if you tear down your cluster or you need to remove it after installation. The other key piece is giving people an ability to view logs. Now, this is likely not going to be fancy, probably not a whole lot of UI work, but at a minimum, allowing users to tail the contents of the container that's running Falco so that we can actually see kind of what's going on. And this is going to be the first in kind of laying the groundwork for future logging, statistics reporting, and visualizations of what's actually happening inside the IDSs. So that's the first item for 12.7. And the second is also a continuation of work that started in 12.6. So this is a related MVC. So this is for our container network security component. Specifically, we're going to install a default network policy object into your GitLab managed K8s clusters. So one thing about Kubernetes clusters is by default, any pods can track or can accept traffic from any other container and pods. But that also means that they can accept traffic from any pod or container inside the cluster. So if you do have any sort of a breach and there is malicious activity happening from somewhere else inside the cluster, even if it's from a particular pod that wouldn't normally talk to other parts, like an application pod, for instance, there's no way to prevent that by default. So what we're proposing is just kind of start down the path of helping to lock that down is applying a container network security piece. We debated back and forth between Calico and Cilium. Now, ultimately, Cilium is the chosen option. And this is for several technical reasons, including the logging offered and then the sort of the technology with which they do the detection and monitoring themselves. So Calico was using IP tables, which we were concerned was going to be a performance issue for large-scale clusters long-term. Cilium leverages BPF, which is much, much faster and a more modern approach to that. So for this MVC, like many things that you've heard us say, we are going to provide basic functionality. And this involves really more sort of installation and listening. Now, because the network policies have the potential for even we'll say a sane set of defaults, we can't guarantee that in every cluster situation, it's not going to accidentally block traffic. So for that reason, we are not going to actually apply a default policy with this MVC. So as it says here, we're going to try to provide an acceptable and sane permissive policy, but we're going to leave it disabled or commented out. So any users that are knowledgeable enough to look at that default policy and decide that it will work for their needs and turn it on may do so. And we'll also allow you to make any configuration changes needed, but we're not actually going to be doing any enforcement by default. We are also going to log all the traffic displayed to the users. So we're currently investigating feasibility of this, but we want to make sure that, again, like things with the WAF and the IDS, that you can at least see an output of all the traffic to help make a better determination what an adjustment to a default or your own default policy might be. So that's pretty much it. That's going to be what we're targeting for 12.7 for this MVC. And then, of course, beyond this, we're going to add some more advanced functionality that you would expect, configuration options, custom network policy objects, having predefined ones from other projects or URLs. And then, of course, if we are blocking or dropping any traffic, the ability to convert that to a finding or vulnerability, including other ways to visualize and integrate that data with our dashboards, potentially in the new threat dashboard that you may have seen in the 12.7 WAF kickoff video. And this one is pretty interesting, allowing it to work with serverless deployments as well. This is all going to be some point in the future, post MVC, post 12.7 release. So that's what we've got. Those are the big items. Thank you again. This has been the 12.7 release kickoff for application infrastructure security. See you next time.